I subscribed to Nintendo Power, GamePro, and EGM all at once for about probably 5 or 6 years. And GamePro, unfortunately, was one of the ones I dropped when I got older, just because it did seem to be more of a kids magazine. But when I was a kid, it was like amazing and fantastic and like really enthusiastic. It reminds me of Game Fan, but a little more. I don't know, a little more put together,
Organized?
organized. There you go. Just with the enthusiasm and the amount of neat little inserts. Like I have a poster here for the SNES Dennis the Menace game. I don't know if anyone actually proudly hung that on their wall, but hey, you know what? It's a free poster. And I also have here a Super Street Fighter 2 strategy guide, which
Yeah.
was bundled with this issue too.
And
So
GamePro is actually one of the best for Street Fighter 2 strategy guides, if I recall correctly. Because
Yeah.
while EGM had a lot of Street Fighter coverage, like GamePro like would really blow it out with. Like people were telling me, oh yeah, I would subscribe to GamePro so I could get those strategy guides. Um, Huge Street Fighter fans who are still there today. So that was one thing that GamePro did actually have over the competition back in the mid '90s.
I remember my first issue of GamePro was I don't know what the month or year was. It was probably like 90 or 91, but it was the Splatterhouse cover, lovingly drawn by Francis Mao, who actually drew the Ninja Turtles cover that I had passed around.
I was just say that as tacky as these covers were, they were miles ahead of those old EGM covers where they literally took screens
Right.
like
Oh,
with
yeah,
a
I love
with a
those.
camera. No, they're tacky and they're adorable in their own way today.
Yeah,
but-
they're
People
cute.
buy software just to put those scan lines on their games.
That's true. It's a lost. It's a
Gotta
lost
have
art, or we're
those.
losing it. How about everybody else? I mean, I told my story. I was a subscriber. I started a few years before they published my tip. I eventually stopped subscribing. Where'd you guys find it, and or did you find it as a kid?
I was just a huge fan. There was a video rental store called Hastings back in College Station, Texas, a little suburb outside of Houston. And they sold GamePro there, they sold EGM, and I would go there and I would just once a month just grab a big stack of magazines, go home and just pour over them and read every single word over and over and reread and reread and reread till they pretty much fell apart. And I was just a huge fan all the way up through to probably the Dreamcast era. Until around that time I kind of lost interest a little bit and came back around college, kind of casually reading those stuff again. So just seeing how it kind of aged and how it kind of adapted to HD Gen consoles. And before I knew it, I had an internship there, and before I knew it, I was working there.
Cool. What do you think GamePro offered that other magazines didn't? Because for me, one of the big selling points of GamePro was their RPG section.
Oh yeah,
And I think it predates Nintendo Powers. I can't be sure about that, so please correct me if I'm wrong. But that magazine really got me psyched for Secret of Mana. Like I reread the review 1,000 times probably before I got the game. I just was so psyched about it. And it seemed like they were really devoted to bringing RPG coverage to Americans, where a lot of it was still sort of like a really niche subject for a lot of magazines.
Oh, absolutely. No,
Yeah.
they had this huge section, and a section dedicated solely to RPGs with beautiful art. They used game art, they used pixel art and everything to kind of illustrate the games for all the Final Fantasies up through Earthbound. GamePro got me into Earthbound, which remains probably my favorite game of all time. And they just showed a lot of love to kind of, like you said, niche genres that not a lot of other people were paying attention to.
It's not a particularly well hidden secret that certain editors had multiple likenesses or names, and the same guy who started the Role Players Realm was the guy who started the sports page. I think it might have been George Jones, but I actually had a occasion to talk with this particular guy, who unfortunately his name I don't remember because he's a PR rep right now, and he was like telling me, yeah, I just really loved RPGs and I wanted to make sure that they got a little bit of love in the magazines, so I went and started Role Players Realm, the section, and I went and started the sports page because I really love sports, and I just came up with different names and wrote under all of those aliases.
I can say I'm happy GamePro had a sports page because it condensed all the things I could skip
Into
at
one
once. Yeah, into one little section.
I always like
Just
hot
tear
at
it
the
out whenever you get your new issue.
No, because then I'd ruin the integrity of the magazine.
I always liked hot at the arcades.
Oh yeah,
personally,
yeah, that was
because-
good section.
Because that was one that was actually relevant to me because I was never really lucky enough to have anything beyond the 8-bit systems. So I could be like, oh, wow, this game's at the arcade? I have to go play it. Wow. And it was generally actually pretty good in comparison to the rest of the magazine.
Matt, were you a GamePro reader?
I was.
Oh,
I
are
mean,
we gonna
I
skip
read
Kat?
everything.
Oh wait, I thought you were
Oh.
giving your piece. Sorry,
No.
sorry, Kat.
No.
Continue.
I'm wounded.
Please tell me how you discovered GamePro and what it means to you.
So I was at a Toys R Us, and at that summer I was really into Rocketeer. Like I was consuming anything that had to do with Rocketeer. And I saw GamePro, and that happened to have that cover, and it's in here right now, actually. And I read that thing cover to cover, and I still remember a lot of it. It's weird, like how I can remember game magazines very, very clearly, but I can't remember like any other kind of magazine. And I think it's just because I never read any magazine as carefully as I did that particular GamePro.
Did you have access to Ranger Rick?
Ranger Rick.
Yes.
I don't think.
I don't.
It was a wildlife magazine for kids. It's not what it sounds like. It was written
Okay.
by Tom of Finland.
I think you're the only one in this room.
So the thing that I would read the reviews, and I didn't care about the game itself so much. I would look at the screenshots and think, oh wow, that's really pretty. And then I would look at the score, and most people remember that the score was usually falling asleep guy, kind of sad guy, bored guy, happy guy, excited guy, and then explodey head guy.
Right.
And 5 explodey heads, or maybe 4 explodey heads, was kind of the holy grail, right? When you saw that it had 4 explodey heads, I don't know, it
Gotta have it.
inexplicably filled me with joy. And
That's
I
what it
think
was meant to do.
And-
In the Game Pro, I don't know what you call it thing. It says that's hot.
it's hot. He's really excited guy. His hair is going everywhere, and his eyes are popping out of his head. He looks like he's suffering explosive decompression.
He can't believe those 16-bit graphics are happening in front of him. It's like we're in the future.
And being a reviewer now, I finally kind of understand the root of rage whenever I write like a bad review against a game that maybe they like and say, well, I don't like this game, and they're like, how dare you don't give it 4 explodey heads? I'm so insulted.
In their mind, they're seeing your picture, but you're kind of sleepy.
Yeah, it's like
And maybe
4.
you have a thumb down. Actually, yeah, they changed the scale at some point, and they added the thumbs
Yeah,
as a
yeah.
gradient.
Right, that's right.
Yeah.
And then they also started. Originally, they didn't. They just had the score, but then in later issues, they would actually explain the different categories
Right.
as to why they gave them those particular things. But I was always so outraged when it would be like 3 explodey heads, 1 orange head, and then another explodey head. It was like, oh,
Yeah.
so
Sorry,
close.
the sound was not up to snuff. You get
Right.
a bored guy with a thumbs up.
I always interpret it more as like a kid becoming increasingly more 90s. Because he starts out with like this.
He needs sunglasses, a skateboard, and he needs a dinosaur friend for that to happen.
But
And
that,
some day glow.
His hair gets spikier.
that particular
does.
issue had something that was like, was it called World Fighters or something like that?
Right. Okay. So
Had a lot
Culture
of-
Brain had these little like manga things that they ran for like 1 year in GamePro, and they were to promote Flying Warriors and Little Ninja Brothers.
They were
And they're like terribly translated. It's like crazy English. It's also like dozens of different fonts to try and characterize the different characters in the comics. But yeah, it was oddly compelling.
It was.
'Cause
It
it
made
was
me
like-
want Flying Warriors.
It was, yeah. It was like the only thing GamePro had compared to like Nintendo Power
It
in terms
also
of comics.
this particular issue had a preview for the Lynx, and I was like, wow, Blue Lightning, it looks so
Yeah.
good.
Now I looked through this again, and this is it's another insert. It's like a several-page insert for Lynx. It's like totally
Yep.
promotional,
Ray
but
just
it's
blew my mind
so
with
it's
this,
so
yeah.
obviously designed by Sendai, who made
Ah,
EGM.
It does look like EGM.
So it's
Yeah.
effectively it's EGM in the middle of GamePro.
does it say advertisement on every page? Because otherwise, some kids got swindled.
No, but it's
I don't
just
think it says advertisement
Some
on any
kid
page.
named Cat Bailey.
it's just called Atari Adventure.
Wow, they're really hot for the links this month.
Yeah. And,
And-
you know, EGM did run it in their mag too.
And it had reviews of the arcade version of Ninja Gaiden. Was that the arcade version of Ninja Gaiden? Or is that like the
My
Genesis
favorite
version?
part of that review is at the end it says, "Bravo, Atari."
Done it again.
Oh, with the
Wait a
Lynx
minute,
version
they
of-
didn't do
yes.
that.
It had the Genesis version of Batman, which looked really, really cool to a kid who only had a Nintendo.
Yeah,
Uh,
it did.
So, like, you know, you kind of live vicariously through these magazines. Like, maybe I never owned a Lynx or a Genesis or an SNES, but, like, I felt like I did, and it got me really hyped up for these games.
Yeah, I did the same thing, except it was with PC games because I came from a kind of a working class family where
Right.
we didn't have a PC right away. So I read PC Gamer for like 2 or 3 years, getting so
Yeah.
jealous.
Yeah.
Like, there's a Maniac Mansion sequel and they talk and it looks like a cartoon. God, I
yeah.
want a computer so bad.
Yeah.
Matt, how'd you discover GamePro?
I have no idea. I
You
don't
don't
remember
know?
at all. But I do remember when she was talking about like hot at the arcades. That's my equivalent to your PC thing. Like, 'cause,
Okay.
like, a lot of times you would see games in there, not necessarily just in GamePro, but in game magazines, you'd see these weird arcade games that you would never actually find in the real world.
Right.
because they went to like the arcade shows and
Yeah,
took them
yeah,
out before.
exactly. And then which I later did once arcades died.
I think I read the Hot at the Arcades that mentioned Street Fighter 2 when it had just come out.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
And that feels like a seminal moment right there because that was the game that changed everything in the arcades. So
Ray.
Well,
GamePro.
like all the magazines I found, it was just my regular trolling of the grocery store. And the funny thing was that I never subscribed to any game magazine except Nintendo Power. So for the longest time, so I'd always just go back and pick up whatever. Yeah, that's it. That's
basically
essentially
it.
Yeah.
The legend lives on.
Yeah, I don't remember what the first one was or anything.
Before we get into you guys talking about, I don't know, your own history with GamePro, I do want to bring up one additional piece of GamePro history, and that is GamePro TV.
So what'd you think of the cart, dude? Definitely a thumbs up, man. Thumbs up! Yeah! It was happening. I pulled it out earlier in the week, and I have not put it down yet. And dude, the graphics, they're like right there.
Yeah, right there.
Can you see them?
I can feel it.
I thought you could.
Okay, actually, okay, we're going to make fun of GamePro TV, but I'm going to say a lot of good things about it, too, because it was really an amazing piece of entertainment for children at the time. The JD Roth was okay. He was an enthusiastic kid show host. They paired him with this guy who was basically the generic store brand version of Pauly Shore. I'm not going to do an impression of him, but even as a child, I found his act...
We're also like a Bill and Ted type.
Sort of like part Wayne, part Bill and Ted, part Pauly Shore. But even as a kid, I was like, this is beneath me. Watching this guy, it's like,
Yeah.
I've seen Wayne's World, sir, and you are no Wayne. But anyways, there's a lot of goofy. I mean, it's kind of like 90s incarnate, just like the lingo, the clothes, the way they sell you things, the meaninglessness of all the terms. Like I was watching a clip of it today, and JD Roth said that Super Adventure Island did not have crisp controls. What is a crisp control? What does that mean? I don't know. Nothing they were saying had any meaning, but